Welcome back to the DDI podcast. I'm Mark Yeeles, the Vice President for Schneider Electric's Secure Power Division here in the UK and Ireland. And in this season, we're bringing together leaders from across the AI ecosystem to discuss the misconceptions of artificial intelligence and the opportunities it brings for businesses, consumers, economies, and industries like healthcare. My guest today is Matt Quirk, Director, Channel and Partner Ecosystem at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Here's what's to come.
Another couple of things that come into it for me is trust and control. So, trust of where that data might be, control of, who has access to it, etc. Time to value. Those three words in that quote for me are super important. And you can think about it in the way of modular data centers, high performance servers, GPUs, all these kind of individual pieces of the puzzle, but they're all designed to come together to make it easier for businesses to adopt. There's a need to bake sustainability into probably every tech decision from day one. And that means designing infrastructure with that whole circularity in mind. And actually, you can use AI to do that, to drive smarter energy usage.
I'm delighted to welcome you onto this pod, Matt. Thanks for joining me today.
Great to be here. Thanks for letting me be part of the conversation. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, same for me. Now, when we start these podcasts, Matt, the first thing I really want to get on the table early so people can get a feel for you and who you are is, let's start with you and, you personally, and how on earth did you end up where you are today? Where did this journey all start for you?
Oh, gosh. Well, it's been a long and interesting journey for me, for sure. I guess, honestly, I've always been drawn to tech because it has an ability to solve interesting and complex problems. And that's kind of the way my brain works. And it's what I enjoy. Careers aren't built in straight lines, as we all know. And my journey is no different to anybody else's. I started life as an engineer, actually, building, fixing things, that kind of stuff. And then my curiosity quickly kind of got the better of me, and I wanted to know what everybody else was doing in the company. So over the years, I started working across different teams, sales, technical support, operations, strategy, which is a little bit about what I do now. And that variety kind of gave me a solid understanding of how businesses work. And I really enjoy that. So I've taken that from, being in small businesses, being in the IT channel for probably a decade, if I think about it. And then I moved into the silicon storage world at a vendor, and then made that transition to HP as it was then. That felt like a good transition because I looked at HP, big company, saw its vision, its purpose, and it's a company that leads with innovation. But I got this real sense that they fundamentally believe in their people and purpose as part of that innovation. So that's where I got to be at HP. And then, of course, we became HPE as we made some adjustments in the company. And now I get the privilege of leading our global OEM program as part of the channel and partner ecosystem, which is great, very rewarding.
Well, Matt, I mean, that was a windy road, I think, rather than a straight one, but fascinating to hear the kind of the twos and throws of different roles that you've undertaken and how you've pivoted into, I think you mentioned there, operations and strategy, and now, really working on the whole partnering of the ecosystem, if you like. But when you look along that kind of winding road, think about everything that you've done. Have there been any major highlights, or what learnings did you pick up along the way that you now take into this current role that you have?
Good question. There's always highlights. There's always other things than highlights too. It's a roller coaster ride, this world of technology that we live in, and there's certainly been plenty of lessons. I think one that stands out for me is as moving from a regional role into a global role at HP, or HPE as we are now. Managing big budgets is one thing, but working with high performance teams across lots of different regions and cultures, that's probably what I'm most proud of learning, I would say. I learned quite quickly that the data and strategy side of running a part of the business is very important, but the leadership side is all about the people. It's all about how you bring them together, how you listen, how you make space for different perspectives, and I think that together with another valuable lesson, which is about the power of clear communications. In the tech environment where it's extremely fast paced, the change in our industry is always going on, the ability to cut through the noise, if you will, simplify the message, but keep moving forward. I've always said that, clear thinking and a strong team can move mountains. So that's probably the biggest one, actually, if I think about it.
I really like that, Matt. So what you're saying is once you cut through, maybe the business school, your degree, your learning, your leadership programs, really it boils down to it's a people game. And
100%. There's always distractions. You can always get distracted or go down paths that you're not sure whether it'll end up somewhere. So it's very important to cut through that noise. Yeah.
I really like that. And fostering people's growth is also very rewarding, right? I mean, I'm a passionate leader myself, especially around the people topic, and want to see people progress and always do better and learn fast. So it sounds like we've had a similar experience, I would say, in the past. Let's call it X number of years. I don't want to give dates away to anybody at this point, right? But so let's move us on a tick then. And thank you for sharing a little bit about you and your kind of background there. And we know that the AI buzzword is being heavily talked about. It's catalyzing growth, isn't it? And fueling investments not just in the UK here, but around the world. In your view, what are the main challenges you see for AI adoption, notably in enterprises? What are you seeing as the kind of either things we need to think more broadly about, or is there a unicorn at the end of the rainbow?
That's a great way of phrasing it. I love the fact that there are unicorns in the tech sector, not just these big companies, but the fluffy ones with horns, perhaps. Well, AI is definitely the hot topic, no question about it. I mean, it's everywhere, and rolling it out, I guess, effectively at scale in the enterprise can be tricky. What do I think are the challenges? Well, I think the biggest perceived challenges are around that complexity, but also another couple of things that come into it for me is trust and control. So trust of where that data might be, control of who has access to it, etc. Everyone's excited. I mean, every company and partner I speak to is extremely excited. The promise of AI is omnipresent in it. I think everything we look at. But I also see that people are a little bit overwhelmed. How do you pick the right use case? How do you manage the data? How do you ensure that governance and the compliance, which is ever important these days? And then there's the question of things like sovereignty, where your data lives, how it's processed, who has access to it. And as I was speaking here, it all does sound overwhelming, but it's worth remembering that it can be as simple as plug and play. If it's thought through effectively, it can be plug and play, and that's where we're talking about partner ecosystems. That's the world I live in. If you match that with the strong infrastructure, which is we're an infrastructure company, of course, that's when things can really start to move along with AI. If I just to finish it, I think the real barrier to AI adoption is not the technology itself. It is that trust, the clarity, and then ultimately having the courage to make a start with it.
Yeah, and I think you kind of you touched on this just then, and I really want to explore a little bit deeper on this because I have like you actually, I have a similar belief around the kind of ecosystem or the collaboration of that ecosystem. And when I think about kind of demystifying AI or data centers more broadly, I think about from the top of a pyramid, I think about the software being used, then I think about the chipset or GPU, and then if I think a little bit wider than that, I think about server rack type technology and how that GPU sits within it. And then I think about the kind of infrastructure that then wraps around it to make all this stuff work. And I think making that easier for people to understand and where people within the ecosystem can fit or do fit and play is also an important factor. I don't know. Do you have a view on this? Because we talk about playing in the ecosystem, but kind of demystifying that kind of roles and responsibilities throughout that stack is also quite important.
Yeah, I like your triangle, your pyramid. It's absolutely true. There is a full stack when it comes to AI, but that doesn't necessarily mean you need to rip and replace everything and start building the pyramid from the ground up. You can take these bite-sized chunks, but to your point, you got many layers there, and we learned a lot, I think, going through the IoT when that was the buzzword. And I think what we learned was no one can do it alone, and AI is no different. By nature, it can be incredibly complex with all those different layers, and it's accelerating fast. We can do more, yesterday than we could do the day before, and I can tell you tomorrow that we'll probably be doing more then. And it does. It spans hardware, software, data, energy, you name it. That partner ecosystem is so important, and at HPE we see that partner ecosystem as an extension of our business. You've probably heard our CEO say many times that partnering is in our DNA, and those long-term relationships like that mean that you get incredible solutions that are smarter, they're more efficient, they're ready to scale. I think for me, having that lined up when you're starting to implement AI means that you get a combination of deep expertise in our respective areas, let's put it that way, and then that shared purpose of being good partners for each other to advance the way we live and work.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Good partners, so we can advance. Love that. Let's talk about data now. Then let's move us on to you. You did actually allude to this in your in the answer to the last question. We talk about compute sovereignty. It's not easy, is it, to shift and lift AI infrastructure or fast track implementation? So, what could we do you think, to make this simpler and easier for businesses?
Yes, you're right. They're all considerations, and we did touch on data and sovereignty a moment ago. And what we see is businesses definitely want more control of their data right now. And I would agree with that. The key, I think, is helping businesses understand what that adoption looks like from simple to scalable. Because as I said, which use cases do you start with? It's not a huge lift and shift of everything. And we do that through our technologies by building modular solutions, so you don't have to do that rip and replace. You've got these smart incremental steps to work with. Identify those use cases with things like we have an AI practice in-house here at HPE to start developing what those might look like. Hybrid infrastructure plays a big part too. You need to know that you've got local data when you need it, but you've also got cloud flexibility when you want it. It's all about, for me, making that journey into AI feel achievable, not overwhelming. We talked a little bit earlier about all the things that you could consider around AI, and it does sound overwhelming, but whichever stakeholder in the business that you're working with, what's the ROI for them in their use case? And that's not just restricted to AI, of course, but for me, you start with the value is. Where is that ROI? So you start with the value is, you move fast, you stack those wins, and that's how AI starts to land in the business and then stick and grow.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, I can give a case study almost, like from a manufacturing background, which is where I came from. And, actually, you alluded to this earlier, which was great, the IoT space. And when I think about that, so what did that start with? Well, really, that started with sensing technology, telling us things that we didn't know the week before we put a sensor on a machine or a facility. And then before you know it, you're actually... we're doing AI. Before we knew it, you're using the formative years of AI, which is collecting data and making some form of analysis. Now, can I honestly say that AI was quite as tight and as advanced as it is today? Of course not. But it was the formative years, really, of the case study, wasn't it, of AI. So thank you for that. I think that gives us a real good and broader view of how to make this simpler and easier. And of course, one of the most important topics, I think, in our industry is how do we do this in the most sustainable way that we can and drive carbon out, not just of our industry, because I think we get trapped sometimes of thinking about this from it's a data center thing. It is, but data centers can solve for good as well, as we know by the backup of science. But as sustainability becomes more of a factor, how is HPE rethinking maybe its strategy or the way that it goes to market in this space, in particular from AI to edge to cloud? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mark. It's one that's absolutely close to my heart. And you mentioned rethinking our strategy. Actually, it's been baked in for a while. As a company that aims to be net zero as an enterprise by 2040, with science-based targets along the way. I might add your nod to that. At HPE, we have a very holistic approach to carbon footprints across the IT estate, edge to cloud, data center, whatever you name it. Everything we do, from the way we design our technology to the way we have the way we deliver it, is built around efficiency and reducing that impact. From a customer standpoint, one big lever for them, from us, is HPE GreenLake Cloud, which is our as a service platform. And a simple example there, real world example there, is it helps customers to not over provision. And that, it's very simple, easy to understand. That reduces energy use and cost. But it still allows business innovation to happen, which is the key to long-term success. I read something on LinkedIn this morning about a chap who worked at Disney and went through that revolution of, we need to move from DVDs to streaming, and a number of other journeys that we hear like that. I think it's really important that you have the ability and flexibility to continue innovation in your company. And if you restrict yourselves too much, then that almost seems impossible. And you probably saw our announcements relatively recently around HPE Private Cloud AI and NVIDIA AI by computing by HPE. These are solutions for, from small all the way up to scale for AI. So there's tuning, training, inference. But those systems and those solutions have been built with improved performance and security, but more importantly for me, for sustainability, better power efficiency. So I'm very excited about the way that helps business move forward.
I love that, and I think HPE and Schneider Electric have a very similar outlook in terms of sustainability. I mean, for ourselves, we've been nominated, which we're very proud of, to be number one in the world from a sustainability standpoint, and we're very proud of that particular piece, certainly from Corporate Knights and Times Magazine. So big recognition for us there. I think one thing that's always worth sharing is that sustainability comes in many different forms, doesn't it, Matt? So we've been looking ourselves about embodied carbon in our products and solutions. So trying to think, how can we take out the carbon that we, formerly would have been using within our products and solutions. So there's just one example there of how we're trying to think about it to kind of marry up with what you just said a couple of seconds ago there.
I think it's also about having that courage to be transparent about what you're doing. And, same at HPE, we have our living progress report that we publish every year, which talks about our journey towards net zero and the kind of things we're doing. I think that sets a good example out there in the market. And as you say, looks at it across the whole space, what you're doing, but as well as what you're implementing out there in the world.
I think that's critical, hey. The transparency and visibility of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how you're performing against what the targets that you set, for me, is the benchmark of trust in terms of what people think about, because thinking is reality, and what the perception of your organisation is. So we're very proud to share that data to the industry. We've touched on this, haven't we, for quite a couple of times actually throughout this podcast, and we talk about trusted partners, and I wonder, how important is this, and why are partnerships so key in the collaboration, and they're vital for the industry to grow? You kind of touched on it previously. I wonder if there's a couple of examples maybe you could draw from where you've seen this work at its best. You maybe started to share something a little bit earlier, but I wonder if you've got something you could share with us here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have tens of thousands of partners across the world at HPE, and so I see it as one big family trying to, as our tagline says, advance the way people live and work. And we touched on IoT earlier, and that was really important to have partnerships and an ecosystem then. But definitely in the AI era, no single player wins alone. It can be perceived as complex for sure. There's lots to think about. But I would say that ecosystems are the new edge in that market, or in that hype cycle of AI. Because when you talked about IoT earlier, well, we started connecting sensors, and then that started to spread. The people that were developing and designing sensors, some of our great OEM partners, in fact, didn't have a clue about the IT world or IP or anything like that. So it wasn't as simple as plugging that into an IP network and presuming that everything would be fine and nobody would be interested in seeing what's going on in that network. So security was huge. And AI is no different to that. I think that in that pyramid we talked about earlier, where you've got software all the way through the infrastructure and down to maybe the base layer of the environment that it sits in, you need to connect those dots. And we're very fortunate to have some great relationships out there across that or through that pyramid to ensure that our customers, our end users, are able to work with us and our partner ecosystem to deliver the business outcome that they want. I think I would go so far as to say, if you're implementing AI, certainly at scale, having a broad partner ecosystem look at what you're trying to have as a business outcome is essential.
Yeah. I mean, I've recognised it. I think, Matt, to be honest, I've been in this role 2.5 years. I think I've sensed more and more, especially in the last 18 months, that ecosystem growing at pace, and people's appetite to partner is growing, well, almost as fast as AI. To be honest, it's almost on that S curve, if you like, of a growth path. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that transposes over in the next few years, well, and months and years, as the pace picks up a bit. And speaking of collaboration, HPE, they've recently announced, or you guys recently announced, new solutions and partnerships with NVIDIA, and I think it was including some MDC, so modular data center and servers. And this was really to try and hone into and accelerate the adoption of agentic and generative AI. I wonder if you could tell us more about that partnership. It sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a very exciting one, and talks to what we've been discussing around partnerships. It's absolutely critical. When I think about that, for me, it's how do we simplify AI for the market? As we talked about, we want to ensure that customers have a very easy route into starting their journey with AI in those steps, those smart steps towards scale. And as our CEO Antonio Neri said, and I've got it written here somewhere, to fully harness the power of AI, HPE and NVIDIA bring to market a comprehensive portfolio of AI solutions that accelerate time to value for enterprises to enhance productivity and generate new revenue streams. There you go. I hope I read that right. But for me, the reason I put it up there is, and wanted to remember it, is it's about that time to value. Those three words in that quote for me are super important. And you can think about it in the way of modular data centers, high performance servers, GPUs, all these kind of individual pieces of the puzzle, but they're all designed to come together to make it easier for businesses to adopt without that complete infrastructure overhaul. You can put a piece of AI in. Let's see how we adapt that to the use case that you've identified. And what's cool is that it ties together into that wider ecosystem, because I know that Schneider's also working with NVIDIA as an example. I think you're doing something with AI factory power with digital twins, if I'm not too much mistaken.
Yeah, we did. I mean, that was announced, I think, last week at the Jensen Huang from NVIDIA made that small announcement on our behalf, which was great. And you're right, this is about how do we create a digital twin of the power infrastructure, so the grid to chip powertrain, and simulate those requirements. And it solves for a number of different challenges, in particular for those that are kind of, and I use the term copy splat, with maybe some of your modular data centers as an example. It just gives that consistency, and also another great thing that I've taken away from today is time to value, and it shrinks that time to value right back and right down. So our collaboration with NVIDIA around the digital twin is exciting, because it then beds into and works alongside the Omniverse platform from NVIDIA themselves. So we're very excited to see what this can bring for the data center industry more broadly in the future. But partnerships are crucial.
Well, I think for me, it's the future of AI, in my opinion. Speed and scale are sort of table stakes, really, but actually it's collaboration that unlocks that transformation that businesses have got to go through.
Absolutely, and I've done some some keynote talks recently where I've talked about the power of the ecosystem. There's a double entendre there, but there's some more work to be done for sure. But I think at least we're all on the same page, which is a great news story for us all. Now, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of this podcast. I can't believe how quickly it's gone. But in seasons or episodes gone past, we've done a bit of future gazing. But I want to ask you a different question actually this time. And I want to ask the question from a sustainability perspective. What do you think is vital to address the sustainability topic in the next decade? What do we need to be thinking about? If we were leaving 2 or 3 points with our listeners here, what should we be leaving them with?
Well, as always, I should probably give you some kind of caveat for my future. It's crystal ball gazing, so please take this with a relative pinch of salt. But I think for me, it's about moving from intent to actual impact. It's not enough really to talk about just having net zero goals. We talked about that a bit earlier. There's a need to bake sustainability into probably every tech decision from day one, and that means designing infrastructure with that whole circularity in mind. And actually, you can use AI to do that, to drive smarter energy usage. I mentioned transparency. I think that's critical as part of the process too. I think the tools are there. I think the intent is there. We just need the urgency. I think the next 10 years is about making sustainability almost like a default setting in tech, not a secondary benefit. The future doesn't wait. You have to shift from that aspiration into action, I think.
I love that. Inspiration into action. Well, what a great place to finish. And Matt, I've truly enjoyed this conversation. It's been both insightful and flowed great, to be honest. So thank you for your time today. And thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I've really enjoyed the chat. They're big topics, right? But I think it comes down to one thing: helping businesses to move forward one step at a time.
Completely agree. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.